I can see my mother-in-law's face the moment those words left her mouth. "You're nothing but trash," Linda hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Michael deserves better than you, better than this pathetic excuse for a wife." I was standing in our kitchen, our beautiful, renovated kitchen with the subway tile backsplash and the quartz countertops we'd saved 3 years to afford. My hands were shaking, not from anger, from the realization that something had just shifted in a way I couldn't undo. That was 8 months ago. What happened after that single phone call would destroy everything Linda built, expose secrets she'd buried for decades, and teach me that sometimes the universe has a sense of justice that no lawyer could ever replicate. But let me back up, because the truth is, before Linda said those words, my life was almost perfect. My name is Ashley, and I'm 42 years old. I live in Riverside, Connecticut, a suburb that sits about 90 minutes from New York City, close enough to feel urban, but far enough to raise a family without needing a second mortgage. Michael and I bought our house 7 years ago, a 1970s colonial with good bones and enough space for our 2 kids, Emma and Tyler. Michael's a senior project manager at a construction firm. I'm a registered nurse at Riverside General Hospital, working the day shift 4 days a week. We're not rich, but we're solid. The mortgage is manageable. We max out our 401ks, keep our credit scores in the high 700s, and we take 1 real vacation a year, usually to the Outer Banks in August. Emma's 11, Tyler's 9. Good kids. They get decent grades, play soccer, and don't give us too much trouble. Michael and I met 15 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding in Boston. He was charming, funny, and he had this way of making you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room. We got married 3 years later at a country club outside Providence. It wasn't a huge wedding, maybe 150 people, but it felt right. Linda, his mother, gave a speech that was half funny and half critical. Looking back, that was the tell. That was the first red flag I chose to ignore. Linda had always been difficult, not in an obvious way, but in the subtle, constant way that mothers-in-law can be. She'd suggest that my mashed potatoes could use less butter. She'd mention that the kids' clothes from Target were cute for what they are. She'd call Michael at least 3 times a week, sometimes during dinner, and he'd always answer. Always. But for the most part, we coexisted. She came to holidays. She brought gifts for the kids' birthdays. Always something practical and expensive, never something they actually wanted. She complimented my work as a nurse in a way that made it sound like I was a glorified babysitter, and Michael, bless him, never really stood up to her. That was our first real point of tension in our marriage, but I learned to live with it. The thing about Linda was that she was successful, independently wealthy, actually. She'd started a staffing agency in the early 1990s, placement services for medical professionals, nurses, therapists, that kind of thing. By the time I met Michael, she'd sold it to a larger company, but retained a consulting position. She was on the board of 3 nonprofits. She had a house on Martha's Vineyard. She belonged to clubs. She was the kind of woman who used the phrase, "connections matter," without irony. Michael's father, David, had died when Michael was 25. Heart attack, sudden. Linda never remarried. She poured everything into her business, her charities, and her only son. And Michael, perhaps inevitably, spent his adulthood trying to make her proud, while also trying to escape her influence. It was exhausting to watch, and honestly, it was starting to wear on our marriage. This past March, things shifted. Linda called Michael at work and told him she wanted to have a serious family conversation. She insisted it happen in person, at her house in Greenwich. Michael came home that Friday looking worried. I asked him what it was about, and he said he didn't know. She'd been cryptic on the phone. "Maybe she's sick," I said, trying to comfort him. "She's not sick," Michael said flatly. "Linda's the healthiest 71-year-old I know." He drove over to her house Saturday morning. I stayed home with the kids. He came back around 4 o'clock, and his entire energy had shifted. He was quiet at dinner. He barely touched his food. When I asked him what Linda wanted, he said, "She thinks I should leave you." I remember the exact moment, standing at the sink, my hands in soapy water, a plate held halfway between the water and the drying rack. "What?" I said, though I'd heard him perfectly. Not in those exact words, Michael said quickly. But yeah, she thinks we're not compatible. She thinks you don't support my career ambitions enough. She thinks— He stopped, running his hand over his face. She thinks you're holding me back. From what? I asked. Michael, we're happy. We have everything we said we wanted. I know, he said. And he did look like he knew. But there was something else in his face, something like shame or maybe guilt. She's always like this. You know how she is. It doesn't mean anything. But it did mean something, because from that moment on, everything Linda said to me carried a new weight. Every comment about the house, about my job, about the way I raised the kids, it all felt like ammunition in a longer argument. Michael and I didn't fight about it, which was almost worse. We just moved around each other carefully, like we were both afraid of breaking something that was already fractured. Then came May. Emma had her school's spring concert on a Tuesday night. Michael had to be in Boston for a client meeting, but he promised he'd be back in time. He wasn't. He called me at 6:30, right as we were getting ready to leave. I'm so sorry, he said. The meeting ran late. I can't make it back. Emma heard this. She was standing right there in her blue dress, her hair in the bun I'd spent 20 minutes perfecting, and she heard her father say he couldn't make it. Tell her I'm sorry, Michael said. Tell her I'll make it up to her. I went to the concert alone. I sat in the middle of the auditorium, surrounded by couples and groups of parents, and I felt the weight of being the only one there for my daughter. Emma sang in the chorus. She was in the back row, but I could see her face scanning the audience for her father. When she didn't find him, her smile faltered. That's when it started to hit me. This wasn't just Linda's interference. This was something deeper. This was a marriage that had been slowly eroding, and I'd been so focused on managing Linda's opinions that I hadn't noticed the foundation cracking under my own feet. Michael came home around midnight. He was genuinely sorry. He held me while I cried about Emma's disappointment. He promised it would never happen again. But something had shifted. Some small trust had been broken. And then came the day in June when Linda called. It was a Tuesday, around 2 in the afternoon. I was at work, on my break, sitting in the break room eating a sad desk salad. My phone buzzed. Linda. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Hello, Linda. Ashley, we need to talk, she said without preamble. About your marriage. I set down my fork. I don't think that's— Michael is unhappy, she continued. He's been unhappy for years, and I think the kindest thing you could do for him is to step aside. Step aside, I repeated flatly. Let him go. File for divorce. Do it amicably, for the children's sake, but do it. He's wasting his life with you, and frankly, you're wasting your life pretending this marriage is something it's not. The break room suddenly felt very small. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the muffled sounds of the hospital beyond the closed door. Linda, I said, my voice steady in a way I didn't feel, I'm going to say this once. Do not call me again. Do not tell Michael what you think he should do. And if you ever speak to me this way again, I will make sure you never see your grandchildren. I hung up, and then I sat there, my salad forgotten, thinking about what she'd said. Was Michael unhappy? Was he? We hadn't had a real conversation in weeks, just logistics and schedules and the careful dance of two people trying not to explode. When I got home that evening, I found Michael in the garage, working on his truck. Your mother called me today, I said. I watched his face change. The guilt was immediate and obvious. She told me I should divorce you, I continued. She said you were unhappy. And Michael, I need to know, is she right? He didn't answer right away. He set down his wrench and looked at me, and in that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before. I saw a man who was absolutely, completely trapped. No, he finally said. She's not right. I love you, Ash, I do, but I don't know how to make her stop. And that's when I realized the real problem. It was never going to be about Michael choosing between his mother and me, because he'd already made that choice years ago. The question was whether I was willing to keep playing second fiddle to Linda's opinions and demands. That night, I made a decision. I called my brother Kevin. Kevin's a divorce attorney in Hartford. We don't advertise it at family dinners, but he's good at what he does. Really good. I asked him to meet me for coffee the next day, just to talk. Not because I decided to leave Michael, but because I needed to understand my options. I needed to know what my life would look like if I had to rebuild it from scratch. Kevin listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Linda's been involved in your marriage this whole time?" he finally asked. "She's always been involved," I said, "but it's gotten worse." Kevin stirred his coffee. "Ashley, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. Linda is dangerous, not because she's evil, but because she's used to controlling outcomes. She's used to getting what she wants. And the fact that she's calling you directly, telling you to leave, that's not a sign of strength. That's a sign of desperation." "Desperation about what?" I asked. "About losing control of Michael," Kevin said. "My guess? She's terrified that he's actually happy with you, that he's built a life that doesn't include her at the center, so she's trying to blow it up." I wanted to believe Kevin was wrong, but I also knew he wasn't. "Just promise me you'll be careful," Kevin said. "Promise me you won't do anything rash, but also promise me you'll protect yourself. Get your documents together, know your credit score, have a plan. Because if Linda's willing to call you and tell you to leave your husband, she's willing to do other things too." I left that coffee shop with a sick feeling in my stomach and a growing sense that this wasn't just about Linda's toxic influence on my marriage anymore. This was about something else entirely, something that would require me to make choices I never thought I'd have to make. But I didn't know that yet. Not really. All I knew was that my mother-in-law had declared war on my marriage, and I had no idea what she was capable of. The next 3 months were like watching a slow-motion car crash that I couldn't stop. July came, and with it, a suffocating heat that made the whole house feel claustrophobic. Michael was working longer hours. He said it was a big project in Hartford, something about a shopping center renovation. He'd leave at 6 in the morning and come home after 8, exhausted, barely speaking. We'd eat dinner in silence while Emma and Tyler chattered about camp and swimming lessons. Then Michael would disappear into his office or the garage, and I'd be left alone with my thoughts and the growing certainty that my marriage was collapsing. I'd follow Kevin's advice. I'd pulled together all my documents, bank statements, property deeds, the mortgage paperwork, even screenshots of our 401k statements. I created a folder on my personal laptop, hidden in a subdirectory labeled Medical Notes. It felt like I was preparing for war while pretending everything was fine, and the cognitive dissonance was eating me alive. Then, in the second week of August, Michael came home with news. "I got offered a position," he said. We were in the kitchen, and he was standing by the counter with his briefcase still in his hand, like he couldn't commit to staying. "Senior director, it's a promotion." "That's great," I said, and I meant it. Michael had been working toward this for years. "Congratulations." "It's in Boston," he continued. The kitchen suddenly felt very still. "Boston," I repeated. "Yeah, the firm's opening a new office there. They want me to head up the regional operations. It's a big opportunity, Ash. It's what I've been working toward." I set down the glass I was holding. "How big of a move are we talking about?" "They want me to start in October." "Michael, how big of a move?" He finally looked at me directly. "I'd need to relocate. The company would help with relocation costs, obviously. We could find a place in the suburbs, Brookline maybe, or Newton, good schools." I couldn't speak. I literally couldn't form words. We'd just renovated this kitchen. We'd been in this house for 7 years. Emma was starting middle school in 2 weeks. Tyler had his soccer team. I had my job at Riverside General, the same job I'd had for 9 years, the same job that paid for the health insurance that covered Emma's braces. "Linda thinks it's a great opportunity," Michael added quietly, and there it was. "Of course she does," I said, my voice flat. "That's not fair," Michael snapped. "This isn't about Linda. This is about my career. This is what I want." "Is it?" I asked. "Or is it what she wants? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're running away. From me, from the kids, from this life we built together." "I'm not running away, I'm stepping up. There's a difference." "Then why didn't you discuss it with me before accepting? Why am I hearing about this like I'm some kind of afterthought?" Michael set down his briefcase and rubbed his face. because I knew you'd react like this." "Like what? Like a wife whose husband is uprooting their entire family without consulting her? Is that the reaction you're talking about?" "I haven't accepted yet," he said quietly. "They gave me 2 weeks to think about it." "And in those 2 weeks, what? You're going to convince me that this is a good idea? That we should all move to Boston because your mother thinks it's a great opportunity, and because your career is more important than our stability?" He didn't answer. He just grabbed his briefcase and walked out of the kitchen. I heard his office door close. I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. That night, I called Kevin. Not for coffee this time, a real conversation, with the kids asleep upstairs. "He's trying to leave," I said. I was sitting on the back patio in the dark, my voice low. "What do you mean, leave?" Kevin asked. "Boston. There's a job, a promotion. He's trying to move us all there, and if I don't go—" I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. Kevin was quiet for a moment. "Has he said that explicitly? That he'll move without you?" "No, but he's not saying he won't either." "Okay," Kevin said, and I could hear the shift in his voice. The lawyer mode Kevin, not the brother mode Kevin. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't make any decisions right now. Don't confront him. Don't cry, don't yell, don't do anything. What you need to do is prepare. This might be a blessing in disguise, actually. If he moves without you, if he abandons the marital home, he's not abandoning anything, he's taking a job. If he moves without you and the children, that's abandonment in the eyes of the court. That's leverage. Ashley, I know this sounds calculated, but right now you need to be calculated. You need to protect yourself and your kids." After we hung up, I sat there in the dark Connecticut summer night, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of traffic on the highway, and I realized something. I was done waiting for Michael to choose me. I was done hoping that things would magically get better. I was done letting Linda pull my husband away from his family 1 inch at a time. I went inside and opened my laptop. I found a family law website and read about Connecticut divorce law. I learned about custody arrangements. I learned about spousal support and child support. I learned that if Michael moved to Boston without us, it would be considered abandonment. I learned that the house, being marital property, would be subject to equitable distribution, which in Connecticut didn't mean 50-50. It meant fair, and fairness was determined by a lot of factors. I learned a lot of things that night. By 3 in the morning, I was exhausted and terrified and oddly calm. The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I called Linda. She picked up on the second ring, which told me she'd been expecting my call. Maybe Michael had already told her about my reaction. Maybe she'd been waiting for me to crack. "Ashley," she said, her voice smooth as butter. "I heard congratulations are in order. Michael must be over the moon about Boston." "Linda, I need to see you," I said. "In person, today. Not at your house, somewhere neutral." There was a pause. "That sounds serious." "It is." We met at a Starbucks in Greenwich, equidistant between our homes. I sat across from her at a small table in the corner, my hands wrapped around a coffee I wasn't going to drink. Linda ordered a black tea, a small, precise gesture that felt perfectly her. "I want to know what you've been telling Michael," I said without preamble. Linda smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've been telling him to pursue his dreams. Is that a problem?" "You've been telling him to leave me." "No," Linda said calmly. "I've been suggesting that you're incompatible, which you are. Michael needs someone who understands his ambitions, his drive. You're content with your little life in Connecticut, but Michael is capable of so much more." "His little life includes 2 children," I said. "Children who need their father." "Children who would be fine," Linda said. "Children adjust. What matters is that Michael is happy, and he's not happy with you." I leaned back in my chair. "You know what I think, Linda? I think you're terrified. I think you spent 50 years controlling your son, and now he's married with kids and a life that doesn't revolve around you. And instead of accepting that, instead of being happy for him, you're trying to sabotage it. You're trying to blow it all up so he has no choice but to come crawling back to you." Linda's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or anger. I think you're a toxic influence, I continued, and I think you've been poisoning Michael against me since the day we met. And I'm done. I'm done letting you have power over my marriage. I'm done pretending that your opinions matter. And if Michael chooses Boston, if he chooses to move away from his family, then that's his choice. But he will pay for it. I stood up. I'm filing for divorce, I said quietly. Not because I want to, but because I won't spend the next 30 years being slowly suffocated by you. And when we go to court, I'm going to tell the judge everything. Every phone call, every cruel comment, every time you tried to manipulate my marriage. And I'm going to walk away with custody of my children and enough child support to build a good life without him. I left before she could respond. I didn't wait for her tea. I just walked out into the bright August sunshine. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. When I got home, Michael was already there. He was sitting in the kitchen with his laptop open, and the expression on his face told me that Linda had called him immediately. "Don't," I said before he could speak. "Just don't. I'm calling Kevin tomorrow. I'm going to file papers. And you're going to have to decide what you want, Michael. Your mother or your family. Because you can't have both." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "Ashley, come on. Don't do this." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "You did this. You and your mother did this. I just finally stopped pretending I had a choice." I walked upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and locked it. And then I sat on the bed we'd shared for 12 years and called Kevin. "I'm ready," I told him. "Whatever I need to do, I'm ready." What I didn't know yet was that Linda had secrets, big secrets, the kind that would make everything that came next possible. Kevin called me 3 days later. I was at work, on the maternity ward, checking on a postpartum patient, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "I found something," he said without preamble. "Something big." My heart started racing. "What do you mean?" "Linda's consulting position," Kevin said. "The one from her staffing agency? I had an investigator pull her tax records. She's still getting paid. A lot. $250,000 a year." I leaned against the wall. "Okay, but that's her consulting fee. She disclosed that when—" "No," Kevin interrupted. "That's not the consulting fee. That's on top of the consulting fee. Ashley, Linda's still running the staffing agency, unofficially. The company that bought her out, Beacon Healthcare Solutions, they're a shell. She owns it. She's been running a staffing operation out of a private office in Stamford for the past 20 years, and she's been reporting all of it as consulting income to avoid corporate structure scrutiny." I couldn't process what he was saying. Why would she do that? "Because," Kevin said slowly, "if she's running an unlicensed staffing operation, that's a crime. And more importantly, if she's been doing this while serving on nonprofit boards, while positioning herself as this ethical business leader, while telling everyone she's retired, that's fraud. That's her entire reputation built on a lie." "Kevin, what does this have to do with my divorce?" "Everything," he said, "because Linda doesn't want this exposed, and she's been very careful to hide it. But if we file for discovery in your divorce, if we subpoena her financial records, all of this comes out. The IRS would get involved. The state licensing board would investigate. She'd lose her nonprofit positions. She'd probably face criminal charges." I sank down onto a bench in the hallway. "You're saying we can use this against her?" "I'm saying we have leverage," Kevin corrected. "And I'm saying we need to be very careful about how we use it, because Linda is not going to go down quietly. She's going to fight. And when she fights, she's going to come at you with everything she has." "I'm ready," I said, though I wasn't sure I was. "Okay," Kevin said. "File the divorce papers. Let's get this started." I filed on a Thursday morning in late August. Kevin handled everything. I signed the papers in his office with a notary present. Michael was served the same afternoon at work. The papers included a request for temporary custody of the children and a freeze on marital assets pending settlement negotiations. Michael called me that night, his voice hollow. "You really did it," he said. "I did what you forced me to do," I replied. "I didn't force you to do anything. I just accepted a job opportunity." "You were going to move to Boston without your family, Michael. You were going to leave us behind because your mother told you to, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life waiting for you to figure out how to cut the cord." He didn't respond. I heard him breathing on the other end of the line. "I'm staying at the Riverside Inn," he finally said. "I'll come get my things this weekend." "Fine," I said, "but you'll do it when the kids are at their aunt's house. I don't want them to see their father treating this like he's escaping a prison." The next morning, Linda called my cell phone. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "What have you done?" she hissed. "I filed for divorce," I said calmly. "You conniving bitch. You're trying to destroy him. You're trying to keep him from his opportunity." "Linda, I'm going to say this once. Stop calling me. Stop contacting me. If you call me again, I'm filing for a restraining order. And trust me, the things I'm prepared to tell a judge about your influence on Michael's family will make that order look like a greeting card." "You don't know who you're dealing with," Linda said, her voice low and dangerous. "Actually, I do," I replied. "I know exactly who you are, and I know all about your little staffing operation in Stamford." The line went silent. I could hear her breathing, fast and panicked. "That's right," I continued. "I know everything. And if you push me, I will burn it all down. I will make sure the IRS knows about every penny you've hidden. I will tell the nonprofit boards exactly what you've been doing. I will destroy you, the same way you tried to destroy my marriage." "You're bluffing," she said, but her voice was shaking. "Am I?" I asked. "Try me. Call me again. Contact Michael. Interfere with my custody arrangement. Do anything, Linda. I'm begging you to give me a reason." I hung up. And then I blocked her number. She didn't call again. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. Michael fought it at first, but once his attorney explained the financial implications, the child support, the spousal support, the division of the house, he seemed to accept it. We settled out of court in December. I got primary custody of the kids. Michael got alternating weekends and 1 week in the summer. He agreed to pay $1,800 a month in child support and $1,500 in alimony until I remarried or turned 55. The house went to me. The 401ks were split. It wasn't a spectacular victory, but it was fair. Michael took the job in Boston anyway. He moved into a condo in Newton in January. Emma and Tyler struggled with the new arrangement at first, but they adapted. Kids do. They're more resilient than we give them credit for. The part I didn't expect was what happened to Linda. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Linda's attorney, a woman named Patricia who handled her nonprofit board positions. She wanted to meet with me. We sat in a coffee shop, different one this time, in Darien, and Patricia explained that Linda's nonprofit positions had been terminated. Apparently, during a routine audit, questions had been raised about her financial disclosures. When the board members investigated, they discovered the existence of her staffing operation and her unreported income. The board had no choice but to ask for her resignation. More significantly, Patricia said, stirring her coffee, the IRS has launched an investigation. There's been a formal inquiry about the nature of her consulting income and whether it was properly reported. I said nothing. I wasn't sure if I'd done this, or if Kevin's investigator had, or if it was just the universe finally catching up to Linda's lies. "I'm not here to blame you," Patricia continued, "but I'm here to tell you that Mrs. Campbell has decided to cease all contact with you and your family. She's also agreed to a financial settlement to cover any damages related to her interference in your marriage. It's not large, $50,000, but it's an acknowledgement of wrongdoing." I stared at her. "She's paying me $50,000? "She's paying you because her attorney advised her that the alternative is a defamation suit that would cost her considerably more, not to mention the publicity that would come with it," Patricia said dryly. "But yes, $50,000. The money hit my account 2 weeks later. I didn't touch it. I opened a college savings account for Emma and Tyler and deposited it all. By the time they were 18, with interest, it would be enough to cover state school, enough to give them options. Linda's staffing operation was shut down by the state in April. The IRS investigation resulted in a settlement where she paid back taxes and penalties totaling $230,000. She kept her house, kept most of her money, but she lost her status. The nonprofit boards removed her from their websites. Her consulting contracts dried up. She became irrelevant. And for someone like Linda, irrelevance was worse than any punishment. I saw her once, about a year later, at a grocery store in Greenwich. She was alone, pushing a cart through the produce section. She looked smaller somehow, older. She didn't see me, and I didn't approach her. But I thought about what Kevin had said that day in his office. Linda wasn't evil. She was just someone who'd built her entire identity on control, and when that control slipped away, there was nothing left underneath. 2 years later, Michael and I finalized our divorce. He married a woman named Susan from his Boston office. They had a daughter. Emma and Tyler met her at Michael's place during summer visits. They seemed fine with it. I didn't remarry. I didn't need to. I had my job at Riverside General, my kids, my house with the renovated kitchen. I had Kevin, who'd become not just my brother but my friend. I had a life that was mine, and most importantly, I had peace. Real, honest, hard-won peace. One afternoon, Emma asked me why I'd fought so hard to keep us in Connecticut, why I'd been willing to blow up her father's marriage rather than move. Because, I told her, you and Tyler deserved a mother who wouldn't disappear, who wouldn't sacrifice herself and her children for someone else's approval. And you deserve to see that sometimes standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. She hugged me then, and I realized that maybe I'd done something right after all.